Stop living at my expense. Pack your things and get out, my husband shouted on my 75th birthday, throwing my handbag out the door. He thought I was a destitute old woman dependent on his pension, but he turned pale when I made a single phone call, and a luxury car arrived for me, and inside was, "Hello, dear listeners. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoy stories about the resilience of the human spirit, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. I would be very interested to know which country you are listening from, so please don't hesitate to write about it in the comments. Enjoy the story. 75. A strange number. It isn't round like 70, nor does it promise the wisdom of the ages like 80. Just 75. In the morning, I woke to the familiar smell of coffee, the kind I had brewed for Arthur every morning for 50 years. The sun, a pale New York sun, barely pierced through the heavy curtains in our bedroom, laying thin stripes on the Persian rug. I had bought that rug with my first major fee for translating German poetry. Arthur had called it bourgeois at the time but had gladly placed his feet on it every morning since. I got up quietly so as not to wake him. I tiptoed to the kitchen. Every object here was a part of my life, my quiet, invisible history. Here are the porcelain cups with thin gold rims, my mother's dowry. She used to say, "Eleanor, a home must have beautiful things. They create comfort and make you hold your back straight." I always remembered that. I took one of them, my favorite, with a tiny crack near the handle that no one but me noticed. Arthur woke when the aroma of freshly brewed coffee had already filled the apartment. He walked into the kitchen as always without looking at me. His gaze was fixed somewhere above my head, as if I were just part of the interior. He was a professor, a man of great learning, and all his life he had behaved as if his thoughts were soaring in spheres inaccessible to mere mortals, and certainly to his wife. "The coffee is bitter, Eleanor," he pronounced, taking the first sip. It wasn't a complaint. It was a statement of fact, as if he were commenting on a change in the weather. For 50 years I had heard similar remarks. My soup was too salty, his shirts not starched enough, the books in his study arranged not by height. I used to get upset. Then I learned not to hear. "Did our son wish you a happy birthday?" I asked, placing a plate of the pancakes he loved in front of him. I knew our son, Daniel, wouldn't call. He was always under the thumb of his wife, Sophia. Arthur snorted. "He has his own worries. You know Sophia." I knew. Oh, I knew Sophia all too well. They arrived for lunch. Daniel, my only son, with his perpetually guilty eyes, and his wife Sophia, whose smile never reached her eyes. She handed me a bright garish bag. Inside was a cashmere scarf of a poisonous pink color. I never wore such colors. Sophia knew this perfectly well. "Happy anniversary, Eleanor," she sang. "We decided to cheer you up, so you don't look so drab." I felt everything inside me clench, but I maintained a calm smile. "Thank you, Sophia. That's very kind of you." I put the scarf in a dresser, knowing I would never take it out. It would lie there, a reminder of how they saw me in this family. A colorless shadow that needed to be painted. Lunch was held in a tense silence, broken only by Arthur's monologues. He pontificated about politics, the decline of morals in modern literature, his talentless graduate students. Daniel, Sophia, and I were merely scenery for his one-man show. I looked at him and wondered when he had stopped seeing me as a person, when I had turned into a function for him, a free accessory to his professorship. After all, this apartment, this very apartment in an old pre-war building with high ceilings and moldings, I had bought it with the money left to me by my parents. An inheritance that I had not spent on dresses and travels, but had invested in our future, in this home. A home that allowed Arthur not to think about domestic matters, to calmly write his monographs and feel like a pillar of society, while his modest salary would have barely covered the bills. He never asked about it. He just took it for granted like everything else. And then at that festive table, which I had set in honor of my 75th birthday, it all happened. Arthur, heated by a debate with himself about the legacy of the Founding Fathers, began to talk about the architecture of Washington, D.C., And of course, the Capitol dome was crowned with the Statue of Freedom by personal decree of President Lincoln in 1863, as a symbol of America's might, he proclaimed, looking patronizingly at Sophia, who nodded with an obsequious air. And then, I don't know why, I said quietly, "Forgive me, Arthur, but the statue was placed on the dome later, during the final construction phase after Lincoln's death. In '63, the dome was still being completed." I said it gently, without any desire to hurt him. Just a fact. I had worked with texts with historical documents my whole life. My memory was sharp, professional. A silence fell at the table. Sophia looked at me with a malicious smirk, anticipating a scandal. Daniel hunched his shoulders. And Arthur? His face slowly turned a deep crimson. His eyes, always so distant, looked at me with a cold, undisguised fury. The fact that I had dared to correct him, the great Professor Chandler, and in the presence of his family, was an unheard-of insult to him, a challenge to his entire authority. He slowly lowered his fork onto his plate. The sound of porcelain on porcelain was like a gunshot. "What did you say?" he hissed. "I just clarified a detail, my dear." Clarified. He jumped up, knocking over his chair. His voice broke into a scream that echoed through our large, quiet apartment. "You dare to correct me? You who has been living off me your whole life. A freeloader." I froze. The words hit me, but they didn't cause pain. They were so monstrously unjust that they seemed absurd. "Stop living at my expense," he roared, his face contorted with rage. "For 50 years I have supported you. For 50 years I have spent my professor's pension on you, fed you, clothed you, and instead of gratitude, you humiliate me in front of my family." He paced the room like a caged animal. Sophia watched him with poorly concealed delight. Daniel sat as pale as a sheet, unable to utter a word in my defense. And I was silent. I looked at this strange, terrible man and did not recognize my husband in him. Inside me it was quiet, empty. There was no resentment, no tears, no desire to make excuses. Suddenly he froze. With a wild determination on his face, he lunged towards the chair where my handbag lay. The same old but beloved one, made of soft leather. He grabbed it, yanked open the door to the hallway, and threw it with all his might onto the landing. The bag hit the wall with a dull thud. "Pack your things and get out," he screamed in my face, spittle flying. "Out of my house. Now." I continued to sit at the table. Around me, the world I had built for half a century, brick by brick, was collapsing, and I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing, only a cold, icy, all-consuming calm. And in that deafening silence, a quiet, distinct sound was heard inside my head. Click. As if an old, rusted lock that had long refused to open had finally given way. The illusion in which I had lived for 50 years had crumbled to dust. And in that moment, for the first time in many years, I saw everything with extreme clarity. I slowly, very slowly, rose from the table. My legs, which had served me faithfully for 75 years, did not tremble. The echo of his scream still hung around me, mixed with the smell of the cooling dinner and my ruined birthday. Arthur was breathing heavily, his chest heaving under the thin fabric of his house shirt. A predatory, triumphant smile was frozen on Sophia's face. She had won. She had gotten what she wanted. Daniel was staring at his plate as if he hoped to burn a hole in it and fall through the earth. None of them expected me to get up. They were waiting for tears, pleas, hysterics. They were waiting for me to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness for daring to have my own memory, my own knowledge. I didn't say a word. I walked around the table. My gaze slid over the overturned chair, over the face of the man I had once loved. Now I saw before me only a pompous, cruel old man with an inflated ego. A stranger. He was just a lodger in my house who had not paid his rent for too long. I went into the hallway. Each step on the familiar, slightly creaky parquet floor echoed in the silence. There was a photograph on the wall. Arthur and I in the year of our wedding. Young, happy. I remember hanging it here, in this carved frame bought at a flea market on the Upper West Side. I thought it would be a symbol of our eternal love. Now I looked at it and saw only two strangers from a distant past. My handbag lay right by the wall by the baseboard, worn old but so dear. I bent down, not feeling the pain in my lower back that usually reminded me of itself in the evening, and picked it up. The cold leather fit comfortably in my palm. My whole life, the one that was outside these walls, fit in it. Passport, glasses, a small notebook, and a phone. I unzipped it. Daniel, finally tearing himself away from his plate, made a timid movement in my direction. "Mom," he began. Sophia immediately put a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. "Don't interfere, Daniel. Father is right. She needs to cool down and think about her behavior." I didn't honor them with a glance. I found the number I needed in my address book. I hadn't called it in many years, but I knew it by heart. I pressed call. Arthur, who was watching me from the doorway, gave a contemptuous chuckle. He thought I was calling my sister in Poughkeepsie or a friend to complain and ask for a place to stay. His posture expressed the utmost degree of disdainful superiority. He was waiting for humiliation. My humiliation. The ring sounded in the receiver. 1, 2. On the third, a calm, low male voice answered. "Sterling." "Leo, it's Eleanor," I said evenly and clearly. It was so quiet in the hallway that my words sounded deafeningly loud. There was a silence on the other end for a second, and then the same calm voice said, "I've been waiting for your call, Eleanor. What happened?" "It's time," I answered with one word. And again a short pause. But in this pause there was no surprise, no questions. There was understanding. "Understood. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Come out." "All right," I said and ended the call. I put the phone back in my bag and began to wait. I stood in the middle of the hallway in my best dress, which I had put on for the party, and just waited. I wasn't going to pack anything. Everything that was truly dear to me could not be put in a suitcase. And everything else was just things. Arthur laughed loudly, mockingly. "Time? And what is it time for, old woman? For the nursing home? What are you complaining to your friend? Asking for a cot? Don't humiliate yourself, Eleanor. Ask for forgiveness, and maybe I'll let you stay in the kitchen on the sofa." I was silent. I looked at the old grandfather clock with chimes that stood against the wall. My grandfather's. I had brought it from my parents' apartment after their death. Arthur had always hated its chimes, said it distracted him from his thoughts, and it reminded me of home, of a real home. The minutes dragged on tortuously for them and completely calmly for me. I could hear Arthur pacing nervously in the living room, Sophia whispering something in Daniel's ear. They didn't understand what was happening. My calmness was driving them crazier than any tears. And then, exactly 10 minutes later, as promised, a quiet, velvety roar of an engine was heard from the courtyard below. A sound completely alien to our old courtyard, where usually only the old Chevys of the neighbors rattled. Sophia was the first to jump to the window. "Oh, who is that?" Arthur followed. I didn't see their faces, but I felt how the atmosphere in the room had changed. The snickers and contempt were replaced by bewilderment. I calmly put on a light coat that was hanging on the rack and went to the door. Where are you going?" Arthur asked in confusion, stepping back from the window. I didn't answer. I turned the key in the lock. The door opened, and I stepped out onto the landing. Downstairs by the entrance stood a black, shiny Mercedes, sleek and predatory as a panther. A man got out of it, elderly but fit, in a perfectly tailored dark suit. Gray hair neatly combed back, his movements calm and confident. Leo Sterling, the son of my father's best friend. A man who all his life had been not just my financial advisor, but a faithful friend of the family, a keeper of its secrets. He saw me on the steps, gave a slight nod and walked around the car to open the back door for me. The gesture was full of such simple, silent respect, the kind I hadn't seen from my own husband in many decades. I glanced up at the windows of our apartment. Two silhouettes stood behind the glass. Arthur and Sophia. I saw their pale, elongated faces of amazement. A silent question was frozen in their eyes, mixed with a first, still unconscious fear. They watched as I, their submissive, gray, dependent Eleanor, got into a luxury car as if I were a queen. I sat on the soft leather seat. Leo carefully closed the door behind me, cutting me off from the past. He got behind the wheel, and the car smoothly, silently moved from its place. I never looked back once. My gaze was fixed forward through the windshield, at the lights of the evening city that was spreading out before me. A city that was mine. Like everything else. The car carried me down the evening avenues, past shining shop windows and hurrying pedestrians. I looked at the familiar facades, but I saw them as if for the first time. They were no longer the backdrop for my life, for my trips to the store or the pharmacy. They were just beautiful buildings in a beautiful city. In my city, Leo was silent the whole way, and I was grateful to him for that. Words were not needed. He brought me to a small but very respectable hotel on the river and, handing me the key card to my room, said only one thing. Rest, Eleanor. Morning is wiser than the evening. I'll call you tomorrow. I woke up not to the smell of coffee and not to Arthur's shuffling steps. I woke up to the silence, an absolute, unfamiliar, almost ringing silence of a hotel room. The sun was flooding the room, reflecting in the mirrored closet door. I was lying on a huge bed with snow-white, crisp sheets and looking at the ceiling. There was no pain inside, only a quiet, cold emptiness, at the bottom of which a steel resolve was being born. The first thing I did was call Leo. He answered instantly, as if he had been waiting by the phone. I asked him to do one thing, the simplest and most important thing at the moment. He listened to me and answered briefly, "It will be done immediately." And then I just waited. I knew Arthur's rituals better than my own. I knew that at exactly 10 in the morning, dressed in his best tweed jacket, he would leave the house and head to his favorite bakery on the corner. Not for the bread, but for the ritual. To buy a fresh croissant, drink a cup of espresso, and feel like a part of the European intelligentsia, as he liked to say. I could almost see him going inside, nodding to the familiar saleswoman, Mary, how she would hand him a bag with his order with a smile. I could see him taking a bank card out of his wallet, our joint card, to which his pension was transferred, but the main capital of which was my funds. A card he used as his undivided property. I imagined him handing it to Mary, and how she, after swiping the card through the terminal, would look up at him in embarrassment. "Mr. Chandler, it's declined." I could see his face. First bewilderment, then a flash of anger. How could it be declined for him, Professor Chandler? He would probably demand to try again, sure that it was a mistake of the stupid machine. And again declined. I imagined his crimson face of humiliation when he had to, fumbling in his pockets, take out crumpled bills to pay in cash. For him it was a public slap in the face. I also predicted his next step with absolute accuracy. Not even half an hour had passed before my phone, lying on the bedside table, vibrated. An unfamiliar number. I didn't answer. A minute later a voice message came. I turned it on, holding the phone to my ear. Arthur's voice, distorted with rage and interference, boomed in the speaker. "Eleanor, it's me. Stop these childish games immediately. What does all this mean? I just got a call from the bank. You've blocked the account. Have you completely lost your mind? Do you understand what you're doing? You're leaving me without a means of subsistence. I demand that you immediately return everything as it was. If you think you'll achieve anything with this pathetic démarche of yours, you are deeply mistaken. You'll come crawling back to me. Mark my words." The message ended. I calmly deleted it. He still didn't understand anything. He thought it was a game, that I was trying to blackmail him. He didn't understand that the games were over forever. The next call came towards evening. It was Daniel. I looked at his name on the screen and felt the last warm thread connecting me to my past life stretch and about to snap. I still forced myself to answer. "Mom." My son's voice on the line sounded tense and guilty. "Yes, Daniel, I'm listening." "Mom, what's going on?" "Dad is beside himself. He says you've blocked all the money." "I have blocked our joint account." "That's true. But why, Mom? You've been together for so many years. You can't do this." "He's an old man. You know him. He's hot-tempered." But what, Daniel?" I asked quietly, and my calmness seemed to embarrass him even more. He hesitated. I could hear a muffled but insistent whisper in the background. Sophia. She was dictating to him what to say. Mom, he began again, and his voice had learned alien intonations. Sophia and I have discussed it. We think you need to come back, but apologize to Father. He'll forgive you. It was your anniversary after all. You provoked him a little and he got carried away. It happens to everyone. Apologize. I had to apologize for being humiliated and kicked out of my own home. Daniel, tell me, are these your thoughts or Sophia's? Another pause and another whisper in the background. This is our joint opinion, he forced out. We're worried about you. Father said, and Sophia thinks so too, that you won't last long on the charity of this friend of yours, Leo, that it's all a pose, and in a week when the money runs out you'll come back on your own repentant. Mom, don't let it come to that. Come back now before it's too late. Come crawling back repentant. Those were Sophia's words. I recognized her style. They were filled with such contempt, such confidence in my helplessness. And at that moment the last thread snapped. It broke without a sound. Thank you for calling, son, I said evenly. Tell your father and your wife that they are mistaken. And don't worry about me, I'm fine. Mom, wait, you don't understand. You have to. I understand everything, Daniel. Perfectly clear. Goodbye. I pressed the end call button, placed the phone on the table, screen down, and looked out the window for a long time at the lights of the tourist boats passing on the river. The tears wouldn't come. There was only a feeling of a huge scorched field inside. My son, my only son, had just delivered an ultimatum to me from the people who had betrayed me. He had chosen them, not me. And this pain, dull aching, turned out to be stronger than yesterday's humiliation. It didn't break me. On the contrary, it turned into a cold, hard crystal in my chest. A crystal that gave me strength. Now I knew there was no way back, and there could be no way back. And that I had to go to the end. Not for revenge, but for myself. For the 50 years that had been taken from me, making me believe that I was nothing. The next few days passed in a fog of legal consultations. Leo surrounded me with care, but not with guardianship. He acted as a strategist, calmly and methodically laying out the options before me. We sat in his severe, light-filled office with a view of St. Isaac's Cathedral. And for the first time in many years I felt that I was being listened to. Not just hearing the words, but understanding their essence. He laid out the documents before me, the certificate of ownership for the apartment, statements from accounts that Arthur didn't even know about. And I saw before me not just papers but a map of my life. A life that I had built myself. In the evenings I was alone in my hotel room. The silence no longer oppressed me. It had become my ally. I thought a lot, remembered. And one evening, going through the images of the past in my memory, I suddenly clearly saw my mother's face, her smile on my wedding day, her eyes full of tears and tenderness, and her hands holding out a small velvet box to me. These are my wedding earrings, Eleanor, she had said then, and my mother's. Let them protect you as they protected us. They were modest antique earrings of dull gold with small but very pure pearls. I only wore them on the biggest holidays. Their value was not in carats, but in the generations of love they carried within them. And at that moment I desperately, to the point of pain in my chest, wanted to see them, just to hold them in my hands, to feel their cool weight, to touch my history. I knew it was foolish, sentimental, but my hand itself reached for the phone. I called Daniel again. I didn't want to talk to him about money or the quarrel. I wanted to ask him for one small simple thing. I thought that maybe this would become the bridge that could still be thrown across the abyss that separated us. He answered immediately. His voice was wary. Mom, did something happen? Hello, Daniel. No, nothing happened. I have a small request for you. What? There was a suspicion in his tone, as if he were expecting another trick. Daniel, in my bedroom, in the top drawer of the dresser, is a burgundy velvet jewelry box. Do you remember it? Yeah, I think so. In a separate pouch there are my mother's wedding earrings, gold with pearls. I really want to have them with me. Could you stop by, get them, and give them to me? You can leave them with the concierge at the hotel if you don't want to meet. A silence hung on the other end. Too long, too tense. It was not the silence of reflection, but the silence of panic. "Mom," he finally said, and his voice had changed strangely, become higher, more uncertain. "The earrings, why do you need them now?" A cold, thin as a needle pricked my heart. "I just want them to be with me." "What's the problem, Daniel?" No problem. It's just, I'm not sure they're there." "What do you mean, not sure?" "They've always been there. For 50 years they've been in the same place." "Well, you were always moving things around. Maybe you put them somewhere else." He spoke too quickly, stumbling over his words. "Let me look later when I have time. I'm very busy at work right now. I listened to his babbling, and the icy needle in my heart turned into a frozen lump. He was lying. Lying ineptly, panically. He was hiding something. "Daniel," I said, and my voice sounded so cold that I didn't recognize it myself. "Look me in the eye, even if it's over the phone, and tell me the truth. Where are the earrings?" He fell silent. I could hear his ragged breathing. And then, almost in a whisper, he forced out, "I don't know, Mom. I don't have time. I'll call you back." And he hung up. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear and listened to the short beeps. But they weren't just beeps. They were a funeral march for my last illusions. The problem was not that he didn't want to help me. The problem was that he couldn't. The earrings were no longer there. I immediately dialed Leo. "Leo, I'm sorry for the late call. I have a very bad feeling." I told him about the conversation with my son. He listened to me in silence, without interrupting. When I finished, he said only one phrase, but there was more determination in it than in all of Arthur's shouts. "I'll check everything, Eleanor. You'll have an answer tomorrow morning." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in an armchair by the window and looked at the dark water of the river. I wasn't thinking about the earrings. I was thinking about what else they could have taken from me. Leo called at 11. He didn't beat around the bush. "Eleanor, are you sitting down?" "Speak, Leo." "I hired a private detective, a former investigator, a very smart guy. In a few hours he found what would have taken the police weeks. He went to the antique shops and buyers in your area." Leo paused, choosing his words. "They sold them." "Yes?" I asked in a colorless voice. "Not just them, Eleanor." Leo's voice was full of restrained fury. "They acted quickly right after you left. Apparently, they decided that you had really disappeared forever and started to clean up." I closed my eyes. "What else?" "Your collection of mice and porcelain. Remember those shepherdess figurines you collected?" I remembered each one. My father had given me one when I was 10. I had bought another myself in Dresden, where I had gone for a translators' conference. The bronze Empire-style candlesticks from the living room. The painting. That Dutch still life that hung over the sofa. The painting that my great-grandfather had brought from Europe. A family heirloom. And Leo paused again. "Your entire jewelry box, including your mother's earrings." I was silent. The air in the room became thick, heavy. It was hard to breathe. This was no longer just a betrayal. It was not a quarrel over money or an apartment. It was a deliberate, methodical destruction of my memory. They hadn't just thrown me out of the house. They were erasing all traces of my existence in it. They were cutting my history out of these walls, selling it off piece by piece for cash. "They sold everything to one person," Leo continued. "The owner of an antique shop on a nearby street. Unofficially, of course, without documents. But my man managed to talk to him. He confirmed everything. He paid well in cash. He said the seller, a respectable elderly professor, was in a great hurry. A respectable professor. They had decided that I would never come back, that a poor, dependent old woman, thrown out on the street, would simply disappear, and they could calmly divide the spoils." "Thank you, Leo," I said. My voice didn't tremble. "Now I know what to do. Please prepare all the necessary documents." I hung up, went to the mirror. A woman with gray hair and very, very old eyes looked back at me. But there were no tears in those eyes. There was only steel, as cold as the waters of the Neva in November. No more sentimentality, no more doubts. Only war. And I was going to win it. I took a deep breath, exhaled, and dialed Leo's number. Leo, we're starting. Without delay. Everything is ready, Eleanor. The courier is already waiting. I didn't ask for details. I trusted him completely. I knew he would do everything precisely, carefully, and ruthlessly, like a surgeon removing a malignant tumor. Painfully but necessary to save a life. My life. I imagined the moment with a cold, detached clarity. Morning in my former apartment. Arthur is probably sitting in his favorite armchair in his study, reading the newspaper and waiting for me, broken and humiliated, to call and beg for forgiveness. Sophia is bustling in the kitchen, already feeling like the full mistress. They are confident in their victory. They think I am just a temporarily offended, capricious old woman who will soon understand her place and return on a short leash. They are enjoying their power, their plans for the future, in which there is no place for me except in the memories of an annoying burden. And then a sharp, demanding ring at the door. Not like a familiar one but an official one. Sophia probably went to open it, her lips pursed in annoyance. On the threshold is a young man in the strict uniform of a courier service with a thick, sealed envelope in his hands. For Mr. Arthur Chandler. Signature required. I could see her taking the envelope, her fingers feeling the thick paper, how she carries it into the study as if it were a snake. For you, Dad. Something official. And then I imagined Arthur's hands breaking the seal, his self-confident face slowly changing as he reads the first lines. He, a professor, used to respectful letters from academies and universities, sees before him the dry, soulless language of jurisprudence. Eviction notice. These two words he probably reread them several times, not believing his eyes. His brain, accustomed to complex intellectual constructs, refused to accept this simple, brutal reality. Eviction. From his apartment. He must have laughed at first, decided it was some ridiculous mistake or another of my foolish antics. He began to read on, and the laughter got stuck in his throat. In the document drafted by Leo's best lawyers, it was stated in black and white, a demand to vacate the living space, which was the sole property of citizen Eleanor Chandler, within 30 calendar days. Basis. Certificate of ownership number so-and-so, dated so-and-so. His world so solid, so unshakable, built on the foundation of his own greatness, at that moment got its first deep crack. He suddenly realized that the walls he considered his did not belong to him, that the carpet under his feet was not his, that even this armchair in which he was sitting was not his. He was a guest who was being asked to leave. But that was only the first blow. Another sheet fell out of the envelope. Not so thick, thinner, official. Sophia, who was watching him, probably asked, "Well, what is it? What nonsense?" He didn't answer. He picked up this second sheet, and I could see his face turn from crimson to deathly pale, how the paper trembled in his hand. It was a copy of a police report, a report of theft of personal property, and then a detailed, merciless list. Gold earrings with pearls belonging to the applicant's mother, 1 pair. A collection of Meissen porcelain figurines, 18th to 19th centuries, 12 pieces. Bronze candlesticks, Empire style, 2 pieces. A painting, canvas, oil, Dutch school, 17th century, still life, 1 piece. Every word in this list was a nail that was being driven into the coffin of his reputation. His self-esteem, his life. The condescension he felt for me instantly evaporated. It was replaced by a pure animal fear. Panic. He understood. Finally, after so many days, he understood. This was not a hysteria, not a woman's whim. It was not a family quarrel that could be hushed up. It was a full-scale, cold legal war. And he was not the attacker in it. He was the accused. Sophia probably snatched the paper from his hands. I could see her eyes running over the lines. I could see her beautiful, predatory face contort. How horror appeared on it. Not just the fear of losing the apartment, it was a different kind of fear. A shameful, sticky fear of a petty thief caught in the act. Theft. This word hung in the air of their living room, poisoning it. Not took to use. Not removed unnecessary junk. Theft. A criminal offense. Their world was collapsing instantly, not in pieces. It was collapsing on them with all its weight in one moment. All their lies, all their self-justifications, all their confidence in my helplessness. It all crumbled to dust. They looked at each other, and in the eyes of their co-conspirator, they saw not support, but a reflection of their own fear. They realized that they had been caught. Not just cut off from money, they had been caught in a crime, a vile, low crime unworthy of a professor, of his refined daughter-in-law. They were no longer the victims of a crazy old woman. They were vulgar thieves. And the most terrible thing for them was that they didn't know. How do I know? How? Who told them? This uncertainty must have been driving them mad. They realized that I was not alone, that behind my back stood someone who acts quickly, efficiently, and ruthlessly. Someone who sees right through them. The phone call was not long in coming. It rang 15 minutes after the courier had noted in his tablet that the package had been delivered. I was sitting in an armchair and looking at the screen. The name Arthur was glowing on it. I didn't answer. He called again and again and again. 5, 10, 15 missed calls. Then a message came, typed with trembling fingers full of typos. Eleanor, call me immediately. This is a monstrous mistake. We have to talk. I calmly deleted the message. And then Sophia's phone rang. I didn't answer either. And her message, full of exclamation marks and hysterical demands to explain everything, I also deleted without reading to the end. Let them talk. Let them scream into the void. Let them choke on their fear. The time for talk was over. Now only documents and the law would speak. I knew they would come. Panic is a bad advisor. It always pushes people to desperate, ill-considered actions. Not having received an answer to their hysterical calls, they could no longer sit idly by. They had to act to regain the illusion of control. So when the concierge from the lobby called me the next day and informed me that Mr. and Mrs. Chandler had arrived, I was not surprised. They say it's urgent, Eleanor. Should I let them up? He asked politely. Yes, of course, I answered calmly. Show them to the lobby bar. I'll be down in 5 minutes. I didn't want to let them into my room. It was my territory, my fortress, a place where their poison couldn't reach me. And the lobby bar is neutral ground, a public place where it's inconvenient to shout and shameful to make a scene. This deprived them of their main weapon, the ability to pressure me in a confined space. I looked at myself in the mirror, put on a strict but elegant pearl gray pantsuit that I had bought 2 days ago. I gathered my hair into a neat bun. No jewelry except for a thin string of pearls around my neck. I looked calm, collected, and expensive. Not at all like the woman they had thrown out of the house a week ago. When I entered the lobby, they were already sitting at a table by the window. They looked terrible. Arthur was gaunt. His usually arrogant face was gray, with bags under his eyes. Sophia was sitting tense as a string. Her fingers were nervously twisting the handle of her handbag. All her feigned elegance was gone. They both looked exhausted and cornered. I approached the table. They jumped up as if on command. Eleanor, Arthur began, with a note of false relief in his voice. Finally. We were so worried. What's going on? Why all this? It's some kind of misunderstanding. Sophia chimed in. Her voice was trembling with poorly concealed anger. Eleanor, we have to talk. You can't do this to your family. It's cruel to file a police report against your own relatives. Do you even understand what you've done? I didn't answer. I silently sat down in an armchair opposite them and gestured for them to sit. They obeyed. I called a waiter. A cup of chamomile tea with honey, please, I said in an even voice. Then I looked at them. Would you like to order something? They stared at me, stunned. My calmness, my everyday intonation threw them off balance. They had been preparing for a battle, for screams, for tears, and I was offering them tea. What tea? Arthur exploded. Are you crazy? We've received an eviction notice. We're facing a criminal case. And you're going to drink tea? Exactly, I answered, looking him straight in the eye. I'm going to drink tea, and you're going to talk. I'm listening to you very attentively. And they began. It was a hurricane. First, please. Arthur talked about the 50 years we had lived together, about how you can't just cross everything out because of a minor quarrel. He said he loved me, that he had lost his temper, that he was wrong. Every word was saturated with lies. I could feel it. This was not a person who had repented. This was a person who was trying to pick a lock to save his own skin. Sophia played a different role. She cried, said that I had always been like a mother to her, that she just wanted to tidy up, to remove the old dusty things to make it more pleasant for me to live. She said that they hadn't sold them, but had just given them to a familiar antiquarian for temporary storage to free up space. She was lying so desperately, so ineptly, that I almost felt sorry for her. I sat and listened in silence, occasionally taking a small sip of warm, fragrant tea. I didn't interrupt. I let them talk, let them vent everything. I looked at their faces, at their gestures, and I saw only one thing: fear. When the stream of pleas and lies ran dry, and I was still silent, they moved on to the second stage. Anger and accusations. How dare you do this to us? Arthur shouted again, forgetting that he was in a public place. I dedicated my whole life to you, and in gratitude you want to throw me out on the street like a dog. You heartless, ungrateful woman. We took care of you, Sophia chimed in. Daniel is your only son, and you want to disgrace his father, to give him a criminal record. You are destroying your own family. I finished my tea and carefully placed the cup on the saucer. The clink of porcelain sounded deafeningly loud in the ensuing silence. Their words no longer hurt me. They were like stones thrown into a deep well. I heard the splash, but they didn't reach the bottom, my heart. Seeing that this wasn't working either, Arthur resorted to the last resort, threats. He leaned towards me across the table. His face was contorted in a malicious grimace. If you don't withdraw your complaints, he whispered, I will tell everyone that you've gone mad, that you have senile dementia. I will gather a council, find doctors who will confirm it. I will tell all our friends, the entire academy, that you have become an insane, vengeful old woman, and that some swindler named Leo is manipulating you to get your apartment. You'll be put in a madhouse, and I'll become your guardian, and then you'll get nothing. Think about it, Eleanor. He leaned back in his chair, breathing heavily. He had played his last trump card. There was a triumph in his eyes. He was sure that this threat would break me. I looked at him for a long time without looking away. I examined his face, every wrinkle, every vein that had filled with blood on his temples, and I felt nothing but a cold pity. I waited until he finished, until a relative silence had once again settled in the bar, broken only by the quiet music and the clinking of dishes. And then I spoke. My voice was quiet, but every sound, every word fell into the silence like drops of mercury. Heavily and inevitably, I addressed Arthur, not even honoring Sophia with a glance. Tell me, Arthur, you are a great intellectual who has judged the value of ideas, the greatness of works of art your whole life. You, who could talk for hours about the legacy of Rembrandt and the market value of the paintings of the minor Dutch masters. I paused, looking him straight in the pupils. What was the market price of my mother's memory? I hope your assessment was accurate. These words were not a scream. They were spoken almost in a whisper, but they hit them with the force of a physical blow. Arthur's face froze. The color drained from it, leaving a grayish pallor. His mouth fell open, but he made no sound. He looked at me as if he had seen a ghost. Sophia flinched as if from a blow, and in her eyes, just a second ago full of fury, a real unfeigned horror flashed. They were crushed not by threats, not by legal terms. They were destroyed by a simple, quiet truth spoken aloud. They looked at me and saw not a victim but a judge. And they knew that the trial had already taken place, and the verdict had been delivered. I slowly stood up, left a bill for the tea on the table, and without another word, turned and walked towards the exit. I felt their gazes on my back. 2 gazes full of horror, confusion, and a final crushing defeat. I walked through the hotel lobby, and my back was straighter than ever in my life. I didn't look back. I knew that the battle had been won not in court, not on paper, but there at that table. But I also knew that a cornered animal is capable of one last, most desperate leap. Arthur was just such an animal whose hide was his reputation, and he was ready to do anything to save it. His last move was predictable in its treachery. A few days later, my cousin Vera called me. Her voice was full of anxiety. "Eleanor, what's going on with you?" Arthur called. "He's so upset. He says you've completely gone downhill after your anniversary, that you're rambling, that some swindler has wormed his way into your confidence, wants to take your apartment. He said you filed some strange police reports that you need to be saved. We were all so worried. He's gathering a family council on Sunday at your house. He said it's mandatory to come, to convince you to come to your senses. Will you come?" I listened to her and felt no anger, only a cold, analytical understanding. There it was, his last gambit. An intervention. To gather all the relatives, to stage a performance before them about my incompetence. To portray himself and Sophia as victims, as concerned children trying to save a lost mother from a cunning predator, Leo. He wanted to hold a public trial where he would be both the prosecutor and the judge. And I, an incompetent accused whose words have no weight. He wanted to use the family as a weapon to turn them against me, to isolate me, and to achieve his goal through public pressure. "Yes, Vera, of course I'll come," I answered calmly. "Don't worry, we'll sort everything out." I hung up and dialed Leo. "Leo, they're staging a circus on Sunday. A family council." "I thought so," he answered without a shadow of surprise. "A classic manipulator's trick." "Eleanor, you don't have to go there." "No, Leo, I'll go. I want you to go with me. Consider me already there," he simply answered. On Sunday, at exactly 3 in the afternoon, Leo and I drove up to my now former home. Leo was, as always, impeccable in his dark suit. In his hands he held a thin leather briefcase. I was wearing the same pearl gray dress I had worn at the meeting at the hotel. It was my armor. When we entered the apartment, the living room was full of people. My sister Vera with her husband, Arthur's nephew with his wife, a few old family friends. They were all sitting with tense, sympathetic faces. In the center of the room, in his armchair, sat Arthur, portraying a grieving patriarch. Next to him on the sofa, her lips pursed, sat Sophia with tear-filled eyes, the very embodiment of filial devotion. My son Daniel was standing by the window, turned away, pretending to study the landscape. Our appearance had the effect of a bombshell. All eyes turned to us, especially to Leo. Panic mixed with hatred flashed in Arthur and Sophia's eyes. They hadn't expected me to bring a predator with me. "Eleanor, and who is this?" Arthur asked hostilely, pointing at Leo. "This is Leo Sterling," I introduced him calmly. "My friend and confidant. He will be present during our conversation." Arthur wanted to object, but I didn't give him the chance. I surveyed the assembled relatives. "Hello, my dears. Thank you for coming. I understand Arthur has already given you his version of events. Now, if you'll allow me, I would like to clarify a few things." Arthur jumped up, interrupting me. "What clarity, Eleanor? Come to your senses. Sit down, listen to what your relatives are telling you. We are all worried about you." He began his speech. It was a masterpiece of hypocrisy. He spoke of my sudden illness, of my clouded mind. He told, with tears in his eyes, how I, under the influence of this dark man, he looked expressively at Leo, had begun to do strange things, to accuse my loved ones of unimaginable things. He begged me to return to the family, to withdraw these terrible, absurd papers that I had signed without understanding their meaning. "We will forgive you everything, Eleanor," he finished pathetically, holding out his hands to me. "Just come to your senses. We only want to save you." Sophia sobbed in agreement, wiping her dry eyes with a handkerchief. The relatives looked at me with pity and anxiety. Vera was ready to cry. The performance was played brilliantly. I waited until he finished. A tense silence hung in the room. Everyone was waiting for my reaction, my tears, my excuses, my hysterics. I calmly looked at Leo and gave a slight nod. He silently stood up, opened his briefcase, and took out several thin folders. He approached each of the present, Vera and her husband, the nephew, the friends, and handed them one such folder. Arthur and Sophia watched his actions, not understanding what was happening. Their faces elongated with a bad premonition. "Please familiarize yourselves with the documents," Leo said in his calm, even voice that could not be ignored. The relatives opened the folders with bewilderment. I saw their faces change. First curiosity, then surprise, then shock. The first document in the folder was a notarized copy of the certificate of ownership for the apartment. In black and white, it stated the name of the sole owner, Eleanor Chandler. Basis: purchase and sale agreement from 1978. Vera looked up at me in amazement. "Eleanor, this is your apartment." I just nodded. The second document was a copy of my police report of theft, with a full list of the stolen items. Arthur's nephew whistled quietly as he read the list. But the highlight of the program was the third document. The last one. It was a simple piece of paper. A receipt, handwritten on a plain sheet. "I, the undersigned antiquarian so-and-so, have received from citizen Arthur Chandler, passport data so-and-so, the following items for sale." And then followed a list that completely coincided with the list from the police report. And at the bottom was Arthur's sprawling, self-confident signature and a date 2 days after my birthday. Leo, seeing the silent question in the relative's eyes, calmly explained. My employee explained to the owner of the antique shop the difference between the status of a witness in a theft case and the status of an accomplice. He chose to cooperate and provided us with the original of this receipt, which is now in a safe place. A dead silence fell in the room. Everyone was looking at Arthur. Not with pity, not with sympathy, but with disgust. He was sitting in his armchair, hunched over, as if all the air had been let out of him. His face was the color of old paper. He looked at the receipt in his nephew's hands, and his lips moved silently. Sophia covered her face with her hands. Their performance had failed miserably. The curtain had fallen, and everyone saw the ugly truth it had been hiding. The first to break the silence was Vera's husband, an elderly, straight-backed retired colonel. He stood up, threw the folder on the table with contempt, and said, looking at Arthur, "You're not just a scoundrel, Arthur, you're a thief." And he, taking Vera by the arm, headed for the exit. After him, silently, one by one, the others began to rise. They walked past Arthur without looking at him, as if he were an empty space. In one day, in 1 hour, he had lost everything. Not an apartment, not money. He had lost what he valued most. His reputation, his face, his right to judge and teach others. He was publicly, mercilessly, and finally destroyed. When only we, I, Leo, and these two, crushed by their shame, were left in the room, I looked for the last time at the man with whom I had lived for 50 years and felt nothing. No anger, no triumph, no pity, only emptiness and relief. "The eviction period expires in 2 weeks, Leo said into the silence. "I advise you not to delay." We turned and walked out. The door closed behind us, cutting off the past forever. We went out into the street, and the bright sunlight hit my eyes. I squinted for a moment. When I opened them again, the world seemed different, clearer, more colorful. The air was filled with the smell of lilac blooming in the front garden. I took a deep breath. And for the first time in many years, this air seemed truly fresh, free. A few months passed. I am sitting on the balcony of my new apartment. It is not as large as the previous one, but it is mine. From the choice of wall color to the last cup in the kitchen, there is a lot of light here. Huge windows overlook a quiet green park. I chose this apartment myself, furnished it myself with light, modern furniture. There is nothing from the past here. No heavy curtains that absorb dust and memories. No antique things that remind me of what was stolen. There is only the present and the future. Arthur moved out 2 days before the deadline specified in the notice. Quietly, without scandals. I was later told that he was renting a tiny room somewhere on the outskirts. He was asked to leave the university of his own accord, after the rumors of his family affairs spread through academic circles. I did not press charges for the theft on Leo's advice. I withdrew the complaint in exchange for his full and unconditional admission of guilt and waiver of any claims to the property. For him, it was more terrible than prison to admit on paper that he was a thief. This document is now kept by Leo as a guarantee of my peace of mind. Sophia and Daniel took him in, but as Vera told me, he didn't live with them for more than a month. Sophia couldn't stand the presence of a loser in her house, a disgraced old man who was no longer a professor with a large apartment in the center. Now he was just a burden to her. Seems he is living alone now. I don't know the details and I don't want to know. His story is over for me. Daniel called me once, asking for forgiveness. He said he was weak, that he couldn't stand up to his father and Sophia. I listened to him and felt no anger, no desire to forgive. I felt only emptiness. He had made his choice that day when he delivered their ultimatum to me. I don't hold it against you, Daniel, I told him. Live your own life. And I hung up. Maybe someday the wound will heal, but the scar will remain forever. I sold the apartment on the waterfront quickly and profitably. A young family with 2 children bought it. When I was handing over the keys to the new owner, a young woman with radiant eyes, she said to me, "Thank you. There is such a bright aura here. You can feel that people lived here with love." I smiled. Yes, once there was a lot of love here. Let it be yours now. I left there without regret. I left behind not a home, but just walls that held the memory of ghosts. The proceeds from the sale, along with my own savings, which Leo had so wisely managed all these years, now give me what I never had: absolute freedom of choice. I can hear the locks on the suitcase clicking in the next room. I've almost finished packing. Light dresses, comfortable shoes, a new camera. On the laptop screen, standing on the table next to me, is the smiling face of my granddaughter, Kate. She lives and studies in Milan. She was the only one who called me all this time just for the sake of it. She would ask how I was feeling, tell me about her affairs. She didn't meddle in the conflict, but I felt her silent support. "Grandma, are you ready?" she chirps. "The tickets are bought. The hotel is booked. The Uffizi Gallery is waiting for us." "Ready, my sunshine," I answer, smiling back at her. "I've been waiting for this my whole life. We are flying to Florence. I have translated dozens of books on the art of the Italian Renaissance. I know every painting by Botticelli, every sculpture by Michelangelo from reproductions. I describe them in words, helped others to see their beauty, but I have never seen them myself. Arthur always said it was a waste of money, that everything could be seen in albums. He always had more important goals for our money: his conferences, his publications, his comfort. Now I will see everything with my own eyes. I will stand before Botticelli's Spring and breathe in its fragrance. I will walk across the Ponte Vecchio, eat gelato in the Piazza della Signoria, and just look at the sky over Tuscany. Not as a professor's wife, not as someone's mother or grandmother, but as Eleanor. Just Eleanor. I end the conversation with Kate and lean back in the wicker chair on my balcony. In my hand is a cup of hot, fragrant tea. The sun is setting, painting the sky in pale pink tones. The city is noisy below, living its life. And I am a part of this life. I think that I feel no triumph, no thirst for revenge. Victory did not bring me gloating. It brought me silence. A silence in my soul. A peace that I had not known for half a century. For 50 years, I had been building a house for a king who thought he had built his own castle. I was the walls, the foundation, the roof, invisible but carrying the entire structure. And now, for the first time in my life, I am simply at home. Thank you for being with me until the very end. If this story touched you, please give it a like and write in the comments which moment resonated with you the most. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. Be healthy, value yourself, and live truly.